When you hear about climate change in the news, it's easy to feel like things are spinning out of control, and we're all going to be stuck watching people wear shorts on planes year-round for the rest of our lives. In spite of your efforts to treat the planet better, like toting around a reusable cup or charging your phone with a solar-powered hat, the barrage of real-time tragic images of our little planet can make the sheer scale of action needed to take on the climate crisis seem more overwhelming than trying to binge The West Wing from scratch. This is especially true for Gen Z. In a survey done by The Lancet in 2021 about climate anxiety among young people, 59% of Gen Z respondents said they were very or extremely worried about the climate. This translated to feelings of sadness, anxiety, guilt, and powerlessness among more than half of the respondents. And 83% believe people have failed to take care of the planet. That's because we have. And so have our governments, says Gen Z. Across the board, nearly 2/3 of these 16 to 25-year-old respondents believe governments are not taking climate concerns seriously, aren't doing enough to avoid climate catastrophe, and are failing young people across the world. But voting-age Gen Zers and millennials, hello, aren't set to become the voting majority in the United States until 2028, as politicians more acclimated to transistor radios than TikTok continue to retain power and make up the largest share of voters. Now that's not meant to sound ageist. The administration of President Biden, who's 80, has set significant climate goals for the United States, seeking to cut planet-warming emissions by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030. But while ambitious, political realities and government gridlock leave open the possibility for these plans to blow away with the wind, which may or may not spin a turbine. Take the Paris Agreement, through which a significant chunk of the world has agreed to limit global greenhouse gas emissions to a 2 degrees Celsius rise, while aiming to keep it below 1.5. President Obama formally entered the US into this accord in 2016, only for President Trump to withdraw from the agreement in 2017, only for President Biden to rejoin the accord in 2020. And just to be clear what the difference is between a 1.5 degree rise and a 2 degree rise, let's take a fun casual stroll down the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's massive report from 2018, which found that limiting a global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees instead of 2 will, among other things, lead to fewer deaths and illnesses from heat, halve the number of people who will suffer from a lack of water, save coral reefs and some sea ice in the Arctic, and reduce the number of heat waves, droughts, and downpours. Now, if this stuff doesn't matter to you because you don't plan on sticking around, or you just love eating double cheeseburgers in your diesel car, the next generation is making moves to take matters into their own hands, and not just through washing clothes in cold water, eating plant-based meat, or using solar-powered adult toys. They're going to court.
The case concerns complaints under Articles 2, 3, 8 and 14 of the Convention as regards the impacts of climate change, which the applicants consider to be imputable to the 33 respondent states, and in particular to the phenomenon of global warming, resulting among other things in heat waves and wildfires affecting the applicants' lives and health.
That's the president of the European Court of Human Rights, where 6 young people aged 11 to 24 are making their case that the governments across Europe aren't doing enough to protect people from climate change. Here's one of their lawyers.
Today's case is about the young. It is about the price that they are paying for the failure of states to tackle the climate emergency. It is about the harm that they will suffer during their lifetimes unless states step up to their responsibilities.
The young plaintiffs claim that 32 European governments are violating fundamental rights to life, privacy, and family. Here's the court's commissioner for human rights.
Rising heat and air pollution means less time spent outdoors, infringing on children's human rights to education, to play and to engage in recreational activities. It is clear that the effects of climate change will confine many children, including the applicants in this case, to a life of hardship. They will spend a longer share of their lives under much more adverse weather conditions.
These 6 plaintiffs, all from Portugal, hope that a ruling in their favor, which would be legally binding on member countries, would force all 27 member countries of the EU, plus others like the United Kingdom and Switzerland, to speed up efforts to build renewable infrastructure and cut carbon emissions. But this lawyer from the UK thinks the kids should have gone through national courts first. And since they're not residents of all the countries they're going after, he says the European Court has no jurisdiction.
This application has been brought directly to this court without any attempt to invoke, let alone exhaust, domestic remedies anywhere. Thus, contrary to the subsidiarity principle national courts have lost the opportunity to give their views on the issues raised by this application, including issues of national, economic and social policy, and this court has been deprived of the benefit of those views.
This was the first climate case brought before this court, but 2 others have since been filed there, and a ruling on any of these isn't expected for at least several months. But as another lawyer for the 6 notes, this case is about accountability.
All governments just try to pass the buck. They try and put the blame elsewhere. Our case is all about saying the responsibility lies individually with each of these governments. The fact that other governments also need to do more is not a defence to the failures of the governments before the court today.
But young climate activists have had some recent success in going after the government. Right here. No, not in this room, this country. Back in August, a Montana state court heard the case of Held v. Montana, in which 16 young environmental activists sued the state of Montana over climate change. The plaintiffs argued that state agencies violated their constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment by allowing permits for fossil fuel development that don't take into consideration greenhouse gas emissions. And they won their case. It marked the first time that a U.S. court has ruled against the government for violating a constitutional right based on climate change. Here's an attorney for Our Children's Trust, the nonprofit law firm that represented the plaintiffs.
The clearest thing, or at least this initial first step, right, is that as of today, as of this order, it's unconstitutional for the state of Montana to continue permitting fossil fuel business as usual. They must consider the constitutional rights of young people.
One of the plaintiffs, a 20-year-old named Claire, said this state-level victory was huge.
I believe that change is really powerful on local levels, and so I think that Montana's decision means that as a state we can change that in a way that might be more effective than federal policies. And so I hope that because Judge Seeley ruled our current energy policy unconstitutional, that we might be able to construct an energy policy that's more in line with Montana's goals and constitution.
Supporters like these gathered in Montana to celebrate the decision.
I'm so inspired and so grateful, and I know what it costs. You know, it's a big commitment to say you're going to be part of a case like this. It takes a lot of time and energy and emotional work, and I feel inspired. And I feel really strongly that the inspiration and appreciation that I have for the youth needs to translate into action.
Now, it is worth noting that some legal experts think this Montana ruling won't make it past an appeal. Montana is also a major coal-producing state, and with a coal-friendly Republican-controlled state legislature now responsible for making the state become compliant with this judge's ruling, it's not exactly clear how the next steps in Montana might play out. But what is clear from Butte to Brussels is that young people are now willing to take serious action to help determine the fate of their planet. According to the UN's 2023 Global Climate Litigation Report, the number of climate lawsuits around the world have doubled over the past 5 years. And they say litigation gives society and individuals just one avenue to address inadequate responses by governments and the private sector to the climate crisis. Another avenue is what all those Gen Zers do in the movie How to Blow Up a Pipeline, but that route seems far more legally dubious. Either way, if you're worried that a warming planet might keep you from wanting to have kids, or get insurance for your property, or just be able to enjoy a comfortable summer day, you might want to think about lawyering up.